My name is John Humphreys. My background is with the Australian, well, the relevant background for this conference. It's with the Australian Libertarian Society and then the Liberal Democrats. Although for the last couple of years I've been doing economic research and lecturing in the Libertarian Republic of Cambodia. I've come back. I've come back to Australia early just for this wonderful conference, so it's really great to be here. And thanks, Coop. So please, everyone, in case he doesn't get enough applause later, please join me in giving a please clap for Andrew Cooper. That also means that you should send all your criticisms to Andrew Cooper. If he gets the credit, he gets the blame. All right. So this panel is based on two simple axioms, two simple premises. The first one is, as some speakers in the last panel said, we are mostly right. I say mostly, I'm a little bit more modest. Hard to believe. So we are mostly right. The second premise is we are mostly losing. In the world of politics, we have tax and spending as high as it's ever been in the history of Australia. We have more of a regulatory state than we've ever had. There used to be a couple of hundreds of pages of regulations passed each year. Now we have 6,000 pages of regulations passed each year. You can imagine, as each year goes by, sitting at home thinking, the one thing wrong with Australia is we need 6,000 new pages each year. So we've got a welfare state, a regulatory state, and that's led to the growth of the nanny state, the government controlling our lifestyle. And that's all enforced through a growing police state and the undermining of the rule of law. So we are losing politically in most of the places. And we're also losing culturally. Control of media, control of education, control of entertainment is mostly, not entirely, but mostly controlled by people with a left-leaning tinge. So we seem to be losing politically and losing culturally, and yet we all know that we're mostly right. So this is a puzzle. What can we do about it? This panel has 4 speakers who are actually doing something, and so we are going to ask them over the next 30 minutes to tell us what they're doing. They've got 4 slightly different approaches, 4 different organizations, all trying to push back against the status, the zeitgeist of the day. The 4 different approaches I would describe, and they can correct me if they don't like my summary. One approach is by Andrew Coops, who's running LibertyWorks, and that approach is focused more on philosophy and culture. And we've got Graham Young, running the Australian Institute for Progress, which is perhaps less philosophical and more focused on sort of public policy that politicians could actually implement in the near future. And we've got Tim Andrews, the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. The focus there is more on grassroots activism and advocacy. And Dan Mitchell, representing here the Centre for Freedom and Prosperity, which more specifically looks at the virtue and benefits of tax competition. So 4 slightly different approaches, and what we're going to do first is we're going to run through for each of the speakers telling us what they're doing, what their organization's doing, and why their organization's activities matter, how they might help us to push back against the status zeitgeist. They're going to speak briefly, then we might ask each other some questions, but this is very much a Q&A based session, so please start thinking now about the questions you might have. We're going to have time for questions, so each talk is probably going to be quite short to start with. But that's enough from me, so we will now pass it on to, well, let's just run down the line, shall we? Unless anyone particularly wants to go first. All right, Tim, you're up then. So everyone, welcome, Tim Andrews.
We founded the Australian Taxpayers Alliance in 2012 as a grassroots free market activist organisation. We now have over 50,000 members across Australia. And the idea is that there are so many special interest groups out there with their hand out for taxpayers. We need to start representing taxpayers. Because it's really, really easy for special interest groups to say, we're going to kick and scream unless you don't pass for this special spending for us. But there's no one out there doing this on behalf of the taxpayer. Secondly, we were about, when we were founding this, a lot of people who were involved in politics only had 2 options. You would either join a political party, or you would attend events at politics. There wasn't on our side of politics the ability to get more directly involved, to feel part of a community, to become friends with people. You would either do those things or you would sit at home shouting at the TV. So with active chapters in most Australian capital cities, we're trying to provide people with that sense of community that they can join with other people to affect change. Whether this be, and basically politicians respond to incentives. We are there to try and say, if you don't pass this because of the fact that, for whatever reason, if you don't pass this bill, we will have people out there with the pitchforks and flaming torches outside your offices, and you're going to lose your job. Politicians respond to incentives like most people. Their incentive is to get re-elected. So we're trying to change the incentive structure of politicians. We're trying to build that movement to try and actually create a more liberty-friendly Australia.
Ditto. Look, I started LibertyWorks because I spent 30 years sitting around barbecues and dinner tables bitching and moaning about the ever-ending increase in the state, and sort of realised that it's not good for my personal psychological health and doesn't help anyone around the dinner table and frankly doesn't achieve anything. So I guess I decided to get up, excuse the pun. Now, LibertyWorks is... I've been involved in many business startups, and the buzzwords of the day now are startups are really ideas in search of a business model, and in some ways that's what LibertyWorks is. It's an idea, it's in search of a viable business model, but our belief is, though, to motivate people to change their vote or to get them to get up or start something, they've got to have some sort of philosophical or belief system that provides that motivation. So we spend a lot of time focusing on education, if you like, but delivering it in a way that's consumable by today's sort of youth. And well, even myself, my attention span has shrunk tenfold since I left university. I mean, I can't barely hold a thought for more than about 30 seconds. So we have small articles that talk about certain free market or free speech or libertarian, dare I say it, ideals and ideas, and we deliver those in sort of a snappy sort of manner, try to create attention-seeking sort of headlines and try to get to the people that we think may be prepared to explore new ideas that is away from what they've been delivered through their education and university days. I've managed to cobble together a fantastic team of essentially volunteers, many of them you see in the room and running around here today. So it's been very heartwarming to see that there are so many people around Australia prepared to make contributions. It's been very heartwarming for me to see that there's many speakers here that are prepared to volunteer their time and effort and expense, I should say, to come here and deliver their messages to you. And frankly, it's been really heartwarming to see that we've got so many people in the room. So I think there is hope. Later on I might delve into my thoughts about the likelihood of us succeeding, but at this point in time I'm feeling very positive. And Dan, I hope you reinforce that.
A lot of what I do at the Center for Freedom and Prosperity is similar to what I did at the Heritage Foundation and the Cato Institute, standards, free market, public finance work. But the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, as its overarching mission, was created to protect and defend tax competition, fiscal sovereignty, and financial privacy on the theory that politicians will almost always want to do the wrong thing because that's how they increase their power over the economy, increase their campaign contributions, increase their coordination with special interest groups. And the theory behind the Center for Freedom and Prosperity is if we can defend tax competition, even tax havens, if we make it so that politicians have to be afraid that the geese with the golden eggs will fly away if they overtax, overspend, and overregulate, that will discipline the politicians. And indeed, if you look back at where top tax rates were on both household and corporate income in 1980, and look at where they are today, there's no question globalization, tax competition, tax havens, have helped bring tax rates down dramatically. That's a victory that our side has achieved. Not like we achieved it, that just the mere fact that you had borders in the world, and those borders involve some countries with low taxes or no taxes, and with financial privacy, human rights laws, that process has helped impose a little bit of discipline on politicians, and the Center for Freedom and Prosperity exists to try to help preserve it, because you have international bureaucracies like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the International Monetary Fund, et cetera, who are acting on behalf of high-tax nations, are trying to harmonize the world so that politicians will in effect have an OPEC of their own. And that's what I'm trying to fight. Thank you.
We probably take a kinder view of politicians. I think a lot of them want to do the right thing. But the job of a politician is to broker between various interests and do it skillfully enough that they end up with 50+1% of the vote, or they and their allies do. We set up the Australian Institute for Progress about 3 years ago now with a seminar. My background was originally in party politics. I got involved in the Liberal Party as a 17-year-old because I wanted to make the world a better place. They say you learn by your mistakes. Well, joining the Queensland Liberal Party back in the 70s was a good place to see a lot of mistakes. But one of the lessons I learned out of that was there's no point having the best ideas in the world if you're not in a position to do something about them. So I got good at running campaigns, and I was Vice President of the Liberal Party between 94 and 97. In that period of time, we actually won campaigns, and the 95 state campaign, we shouldn't have won. So we take some of those lessons into the think tank. One of the things we do that I don't think too many others do is public opinion research, qualitative research, to understand how to pitch our ideas as effectively as we possibly can, to identify the constituencies that we need to move across. And we have an idea of what politicians we're trying to influence, so we know what constituencies we think will make up their majority. So if we can show them that our ideas are a good way of getting that to that constituency, then we can encourage them to virtue. It's a bit of a sword and shield process. I've got a half hour every week on ABC radio. I get op-eds in the paper and so on. We try and go into specific policy areas and scope out the area, perhaps more aggressively than we think is likely to be doable. But by doing that, we make room where the political parties can move behind. I'll just give you two examples there. One that I'm working on at the moment is the move by the state government to ban developer donations. Now, they've done that off the back of a report by the CCC, the Crime and Corruption Commission. It's always difficult to fight against someone like the CCC because they have this imprimatur of allegedly being independent and semi-sanctified, I guess. But really what's going on is the state Labor Party is trying to nobble the LNP in terms of their fundraising, because the LNP get more money from developers than the Labor Party does. And that's what it's really about. But you can't have that argument, you've got to have the argument over here. So we're in there heavily saying, well, this is a democratic right. Just because someone develops property and someone in their industry might be suspected of being corrupt, that's no reason to convict them. That's not the way our civilisation works. That's not the way our legal system works. So I've got a number of things that I'm putting into place in that area that will hopefully get into the media. We'll have the fight that the LNP doesn't want to have, or the other parties that might be getting developer donations, because if they have the fight themselves, they'll look like they're corrupt and they're just trying to look after their cronies. Whereas we go out there, we've got nothing to lose. If someone wants to think I'm corrupt, well, that's fine. I don't think too many people would think that, but that's fine. The other issue that we're concentrating on at the moment is electricity. It's just a complete disgrace that a country like ours cannot keep the lights on a reliable basis and at an affordable price. Absolute disgrace. And politicians have traded away, for a variety of reasons, a decent electricity system. Queensland, however, is lucky enough that we've actually got a surplus of electricity at the moment. So it gives us room to move. And we've got a group of about 20 people together in Anthony Capello's offices 6 weeks ago, people who had expertise in electricity. We did what we called a think shop, and we got enough stuff out of that that we're running a campaign on electricity at the moment, and we managed to actually get in front of the Transgrid and Powerlink, who are the two operators of the cross-state interconnector and electricity. New South Wales has got a problem. They might be running out of power. We've got a surplus. You could double that. We could sell our power to them. That would lower our costs and solve the problem for them. We're in there about a week or two in front. So that's the sort of stuff we're trying to do. To be there in the policy coalface on issues that will make a difference in terms of elections, election outcomes, but also standard living for people, the sort of country that, the sort of state that they're living in.
Thank you all. Well, Coops was silly enough to give me the microphone, so I'm going to take the privilege of asking a few questions before I open it up to the crowd. First one, anyone can jump in on this. I don't know who has a strong opinion. Breitbart, the person, not the organisation, is famous for saying that politics is downstream from culture. And a lot of people active in politics, or political philosophy, ideas, and the pro-liberty movement tend to focus on the political side of things. The small parties, major parties, and the political activism, grassroots activism. I wonder whether anyone can speak to whether we need to be paying a greater attention to the culture wars, control of the media, education and entertainment, and what we can do about it. What can we do to start getting a pro-liberty voice, having a stronger role in culture? So, Andrew, do you want to start that?
Yes.
Excellent. So,
I think, look, for me, we write a lot about the culture wars, and because a lot of the commentary around those social issues or desires to control others comes from a philosophy that's essentially authoritarian based. And if you come from that sort of philosophy where you see that what you desire should prevail and your thinking and your thoughts should be imposed on others, well then it's just a very short sort of step away to then start imposing higher increases on taxation in order to impose those desires. And so one thing leads to the other. Now, we don't engage in the culture wars with a desire to impose our own view. I mean, I'm essentially a libertarian. I live my life as a boring conservative, but I don't give a stuff what you guys do in your private lives. And I think if we all adopted that, the tagline for Liberty Fest is "Live and Let Live." And to me, if I think we all adopted that, if we all took the view that what other people do in their lives shouldn't be any of our business, I think we'd all be a bit happier in our own selves, because we wouldn't be so stressed about all the crazy people out there that we think are doing things that are counterproductive. But one thing leads to the other. I mean, you can't allow people to. It's difficult to allow people to lead lives that are self-destructive if you then got to later pick up their health bill, for example. So one leads to the other, and so we do a fair bit of work in that area, in the cultural area. But the reason we do that is because ultimately it's an authoritarian approach that also spills over into the tax area.
I'd like to make a few comments. Yes, culture is important, and the internet and new media give us some opportunities there, and I don't think in Australia we milk those to the extent that they're being milked. And you mentioned Breitbart, that's a pretty good example. You've got Mark with his outsiders, you've got some stuff happening on Sky. For the life of me, I can't understand why Gina Reinhardt was trying to buy Channel 10 or buy into Fairfax. For a very small amount of money, she could set up her own news operation online, and it could make a huge impact. So, Ian Plimer, you're around here. If you can carry that message back to Mrs. Reinhardt. So that's one point. Second point is we're losing some of these culture wars because of personnel. So the other side is stacked out, and they're quite shameless at stacking out. So those of you from Queensland, have a look at who it was who opposed the Carmody appointment. Sofronoff was one. Guess where he is now? Davies from the bar board was one. Guess where he is now? Both on the court. Their side rewards their warriors. Our side, well, we had mention of Malcolm Turnbull rather. Not a lot of difference. Malcolm's a bad Christian name if you're going into politics on my side. And the appointments that have been made to run the ABC board, for example. Now, I don't know how many of you are University of Queensland alumni, but they've got their elections going for the Senate at the moment. And I'm not sure, there's 20 people there, I don't know who to vote for, but I reckon if someone's got some ideas, we could all caucus. And we could get behind one or two people there, and you might start to make a difference. And the third thing I'd say is that most people get culture through institutions, because our culture is, and our society embeds a huge amount of knowledge and information in the way we do things. Just the architecture that's in this building gives way to certain ways of thinking about things, the way the road system operates, you know, the idea of the parliament, etc. So policies that we get into place actually help in the culture wars, because most people don't think about culture, they do it. And if you get a large enough constituency, for example, for free trade, it's very difficult to undo it. One of the problems in the argument over tariffs was that you had people down in South Australia and Victoria, for example, in the car industry, concentrated in particular seats. They could make a difference to an election, whereas the beneficiaries of lowering tariffs were spread all over the place and generally didn't even know they were beneficiaries. So there's things you can do in policy which will win the culture wars, which aren't, strictly speaking, cultural.
Just to very quickly add to the point about institutions, and this is an issue I've changed my mind on recently. The reason I think we've seen the left attack traditional institutions so much is without institutions, people turn to government, and you increase the size of government. The reason why the culturals, I would argue, should concern us is because if we don't get involved in defending the fundamental institutions of Western civilization, you will see people go to government. There's nothing else left. Private, charities, religious, societies that help people. These are the things that we need to strengthen so that we won't rely on big government taking care of everyone. And that's why the left is so insistent on destroying these institutions.
Well, just to keep on this for a second, as the resident American at the table, I wonder if you have a comment on what we can do to push back against the academy, the academic growth. I'm thinking of UC Berkeley and their inability to host someone like Ben Shapiro without spending $1 million, and their inability to have a free speech week because free speech is racist. Especially in parts of America's academy now, it seems like it's a hate crime to be a conservative. Is there anything we can do, or any thoughts on the issue?
Well, I don't know what y'all can do from here in Australia, but there is a fundamental difference on the left between sort of classical liberal left and sort of the modern socialist Antifa or Antifa, I don't even know how you say that word, left that's doing all the crazy stuff on college campuses. And there really is a totalitarian mindset, and victory will come when we convince the rational left, the sort of classical liberal left, that they need to break with them. And I think that's actually happening. Now, it's not my area, I don't work on that. I think I've only written one column that's even remotely on that topic. But I think there is a lot of, I don't know whether you call it buyer's remorse, where they're looking at the sort of the Democratic Party and sort of just the rational leftists in America are looking at the Bernie Sanders types and these campus radicals and realizing that is totalitarian. But beyond that, I don't have the expertise to get into the issue.
I just wanted to raise it so everyone was scared. Another general question. Any thoughts? We don't have to have everyone chiming in if you don't have something strong to say, but any thoughts on, there's some obvious things we can be doing better. There's some things that we should be considering changing our tactics or strategy or language that would help our movement. Tim, you want to start?
Graham already made a few good comments today about communicating liberty, and I just want to expand with a few thoughts of my own. And the first of this is, I think that libertarians should stop talking about liberty. This is rather paradoxical. And liberty is quite important here, what we believe. But the thing is, there are only 7% of people who care about it. If you are talking about liberty and you're talking about freedom, congratulations, you have a potential total market of 7% of people in Australia. You're not going to reach anyone else. People care about a lot of different things. You need to find out what they value. Those of you who were in Graham's presentations, you heard, the different moral foundations, whether it be order or fairness, care. Find out what people believe is important for them. Put yourselves in their shoes and frame your argument back. Freedom is not something that people care about. So if somebody talks about fairness, you respond to them in the language of fairness. If someone believes in order, don't go out on a full liberty sort of anarchist rant, but talk about the order that comes from social interactions, the spontaneous order, the sort of Hayekian Cadillacs. Talk to them, if they care about fairness, talk to them about how our current system is unfair and is fair. But secondly, the other thing is, talk to people at an emotional level. One of the problems is that also recognizing when somebody comes up to you that sometimes they're hurting because of some of our policies create losers. And they do, and we need to admit this. Empathise with people. If somebody's lost their jobs and they blame imports, don't go and show them a trade diagram and try and explain Ricardo's principle of comparative advantage. Simply doesn't work. And don't call them an idiot when they get annoyed at you. Calling someone stupid has never, ever convinced anyone, ever. Sympathise with them, turn the other on, and rather than just do a rational argument, present an emotional vision. What we will have is one of those positive visions for a future society. We need people to buy into that positive vision. And that sort of positive emotional narrative buying is something that I think we generally fail pretty badly at, and I think we should be improving at.
So the question is, there's some things we can do better. So clearly I need to change the name of Liberty Fest to Centrefest. That's a start. Look, there's some things we can do better. We can, instead of passing 6,000 pieces of legislation a year, we could repeal 12,000 pieces. Instead of funding more and more taxpayers' money going into state-based education, we can privatise those schools, turn them into charter schools. If we must subsidise schooling, give people a voucher. Adopt Milton Friedman's voucher system. Allow schools to compete with each other. Allow them to specialise. And allow parents to take their children to the schools that they want and get the education they want. These are just little things, by the way. If we want to do some little things, we could, wind back the welfare state. In some of the other sessions, the IPA do a lot of work on this. We're at the point now, we're at the tipping point where over 50% of the population pay no net tax here in Australia. So half the population is beating up on the other half. And what's going to happen? It's going to continue. So it's not to me, it's not a very rosy thing. I don't think being slightly better at government or being slightly better in the education system, it gets us nowhere. I'm sort of at the point where I think there needs to be radical change, and there needs to be, and if there isn't, if we can't get the politicians that are appropriate to deliver radical change, then we're going to be like Greece. We're going to see the fiscal cliff coming. And we're going to see it. We're going to be years out, we're going to see it. We're going to be just like Greece. We're going to accelerate towards it.
I just wanted to make some comments in a sense on what Tim said, but also what Andrew said. There's different levels of communication and there's different levels of being involved in issues. I don't have a problem with the Liberty Fest. We all have to talk to each other. We all have to get across the principles that underlie what it is that we believe in and why they're good ideas. And one of the problems I think we've got with politicians is I cut my teeth in politics in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. We were arguing about all of these things then. And the current crop of politicians, they didn't have that argument. They don't understand why we do things the way we do. So it's easy to push them back. So at one level, those sorts of people need to be educated. But at another level, we're in the problem-solving business. If people don't have a problem that they understand they have and they want to solve, they're not going to be interested in your solution. So I'd echo Tim in that sense, in that we need to be focused at two levels. One is talking amongst ourselves and the high-level decision makers. The other is when you try to communicate out more broadly. And in that case, you win elections on policies. On issues, not policies or platforms. People aren't interested in that sort of abstraction. They're interested in what's in it for me.
I have a whole page of other questions, but we're running out of time, so I'll let you guys have a go. Darren?
If I could indulge you just with a quick story, which is relevant. For the past year, I've been working for Senator Malcolm Roberts, and I drove with him around southwest Queensland for a week, meeting with farmers, small business people, just all that sort of thing. And actually, that actually warmed my heart a lot, because there's a lot of people who are actually kind of libertarians out there. So actually, the concept of freedom, freedom is definitely connects to them, but it has to connect to them in their personal circumstances. They complain about too many taxes, too many regulations, and just government interfering with their lives. And that's where, where you can connect them with the broader concept of freedom. So, that's a great sign for me. Sorry, no question.
Get my attention if you want to ask a question.
Tax. Now, we hear from both sides of politics that the NDIS is a great sort of a scheme, and I suppose motherhood-wise it is. But as a country, I personally don't think we can afford the NDIS. And we're spending billions of dollars on it. How do you fight against a policy where both sides of politics, or both mainstream parties, push it?
Both the Liberal Democrats.
I'm happy to have a go at that. The NDIS, you've got a huge problem there. So you've got to pick your battles. So the first thing I'd say is probably leave it alone. The second thing is it is going to be unaffordable, so that's going to be a problem. So maybe you don't have the argument about the NDIS. Maybe you have an argument about what percentage of the GDP government ought to take in tax. And maybe you try and get a commitment out of all sides that it won't be more than, say, 25%. Now, I don't think 25% is a good figure. I think it should be less than that. But we're in the real world here. And if you can tie their feet to the ground, you can get them worrying about those sorts of things, they'll kind of deal with the NDIS as much as you can at the moment. To do more than that, that's a long-term project, and I'm not quite sure where you go there. But in the meantime, it's damage limitation, I think. And that's my idea of damage limitation. But if someone's got a better one, I'm happy to adopt it and start working out some policy on it.
Quick answer to that from me. It's hard to beat something with nothing. So if we're going to say don't do the NDIS, we might have to, and suggesting something doesn't have to be an interventionist policy. We can look at the problem and try to find a liberty-based solution, but if we're just saying don't do that, it's hard to get people passionate. If we're saying don't do that, instead do this, it gives us something that we can fight back with. So it's hard to beat something with nothing. That's the only thing I'd add. Dan, did you want to?
I didn't know what NDIS was until I was just told, but I can relate it to something in America. 30 years ago, the notion that you could have a serious debate about privatizing Social Security was unheard of in the U.S. We had a serious debate in the late 1990s. We got close, failed, probably because of Monica Lewinsky. That was the most expensive you-know-what in world history. Because Bill Clinton was ready to, he was on our side. In the last several years in the U.S., we've had very real debates about block granting Medicaid, that's our government-run health care for poor people, to the states. We've had very serious debates about changing our Medicare, government-run health care system for old people, into an effective voucher. Now, Donald Trump, not being a free market, small government conservative by any stretch of the imagination, those ideas are now sort of off to the side as we have Twitter wars and stuff like that. But just because something isn't realistic today doesn't mean that people on a think tank level shouldn't be talking about it, because at some point, maybe 10 years, 15 years down the road, if we do enough work and explain the issue well enough, the issue actually becomes serious, and then maybe in a few cases, we might actually win.
When you see a policy, any bad policy being implemented, you'll inevitably find it's being proposed and supported loudly by entire coalition of groups, which is actually from university, from the ABC, from a taxpayer-funded so-called NGO, and from all of the thing all of these groups have in common is they're funded by our taxes. We have entire industries dedicated to call for higher taxes for more programs, to fund more people, to call for higher taxes for more programs, and we are paying for it. One of the long-term solutions is to break the cycle by cutting and slashing the funding to these organisations so they're no longer using our money to campaign against us.
Yes, that's a very short question. This applies to libertarians and often people on the right as well. Herding libertarians is like herding cats. So I'm going to ask you all, how are you going to go about herding cats?
I'd like to just point out, sorry, Jim, I'd just like to point out that this is a libertarian conference. It just happens to be at least 3 of them up on the stage. Yeah, probably 4, damn close. The question was, how do you get libertarians to agree? I mean, this is the great challenge, isn't it? People that believe in running their own race, being personally responsible, not relying on government or welfare or the largesse of the state, kind of ignore government, right? But the trouble is, what's happening now is that I think there's going to be a reaction. What's happening now is that government is all pervasive. It's everywhere now. You know, I was brought up in the land out in central Queensland where the only way you got ahead was by clearing, my parents cleared land, they did everything themselves. If they had a problem, they invented something to fix that problem. Now, the land is dominated. The government, the state governments, they're stripping property rights away from landholders. They're reducing, they're diminishing the ability for entrepreneurs, even in that setting, to, sort of carve their own space in the world and make a contribution to society. So I think the government's tentacles are just reaching everywhere. And I think libertarians are either going to get energised by that, or maybe just give up, or maybe we go take over a small country somewhere and install a benevolent dictatorship where there's only 5% tax of GDP or some crazy thing like that.
Welcome to Cambodia. All right, so a quick answer to this. There's a lot of different things you can do if you want to get into the liberty movement. And I stress this a lot, I've said this many times. People often argue, should I join a big party or a small party? Go into think tanks, academia, media. The answer is yes. You should do whichever one you're passionate about. Trying to get people to do what they're not passionate about means they'll probably give up quicker. It's better to have somebody active in media, even if you think media is the wrong way, get them active in that if that's what they love, because they won't give up. So find the part of the liberty movement that makes you happiest and get involved in that, because it's good for you to have a good quality of life as well. You want to make sure you're happy while you're doing it, so you keep doing it. There was another question right here.
Oh, thanks. Dan, I just wondered if you could expand a bit further on when you were talking about the global influences on a government and how you can act at that interface between giving more power to the citizens and what was influenced, and maybe even some of the significance of those global influences, like the UN Charter of Rights and everything else.
I actually think the UN is the least of our worries because it's so bloody ineffective. And that's the good news. I'm much more worried about the OECD and the IMF because they're actually effective in a deadly way. The OECD came out in the late 1990s with what they called their harmful tax competition initiative. They put together a blacklist of so-called tax havens. And if you read their documents, it's very, very clear. We have to stop tax competition. We have to stamp out tax havens because it's making it difficult for us to impose very high tax rates and redistribute lots of income. So we don't have to speculate on their motives. They openly say what they're trying to do. And you read IMF documents. As a matter of fact, I'm writing my column this evening is about the IMF. They have a new fiscal monitor out where they've come up with a definition called progressive tax capacity, a new way that they're going to try to advocate higher tax rates around the world. And when these international bureaucracies in effect say, we get to set best practices for the entire world, and countries that don't join up with us and don't agree to our policies, they get put on blacklists, they get named and shamed, they even get the threat of financial protectionism. This to me is a huge danger because as bad as our national governments may be, You get a bunch of national governments getting together, like a bunch of oil-producing countries getting together to form OPEC. You get an OPEC for politicians, and there's no question we will unravel the progress we've made in terms of lowering tax rates over the last 30 years. We'll go back to those wretched tax rates in the 60s and 70s if the international bureaucrats get their way. So I think that's a very significant threat in terms of fiscal policy. I love globalization, not just because I like trade. I love globalization because it makes it easier for labor and capital to cross borders. Ultimately, as Andrew said, we may have to all just cross borders ourselves. We'll take over Vanuatu and set up a libertarian paradise there. Oh, by the way, since I'm in Australia, I can't resist. I went to Vanuatu last year because the local business community was being threatened with an income tax. And they wanted me to give a speech and do meetings to explain why that would be a bad idea. You know who was financing the campaign for a Vanuatu income tax? You guys. It was Australia's, but DFAT or something like that. You guys were in there with your bureaucrats, your tax money, in effect trying to bribe the Vanuatu government to adopt an income tax and make their country poorer. It's insane. So we, if we're going to take over Vanuatu, we need to do it soon before DFAT ruins it.
Shame on all of you. Lightning round, if it's really quick questions and answers, we could potentially get through 2 or 3, but otherwise...
It'll be really quick to Graham and Dan. I'm actually an organic beef producer from around Blackall, so I've got a pretty fair idea that of what's going on the land and the regions. Not only are agricultural producers, but all primary producers, including mining, energy and all that, and businesses out there. About 98% of us are actually family businesses. For Graham and Dan, I know you're from America, but can you give us some guidance, because there is no one leading, including our little ginger-haired friend from One Nation.
Guidance on what?
Well, on being able to actually influence policy and actually get some leadership.
What electorate are you in? What electorate are you in?
We're in Warrego and Kennedy.
What's the Canada's? You got a problem. The margins are too good. You need a redistribution to get yourself a marginal seat, and you got some real purchase.
Well, how can we get libertarians into the Senate?
Vote for them, yeah. Donate to them. One thing you can do is you can donate to us. How's the organic beef market? Better than the inorganic beef market, I'll bet.
We're doing all right.
Good.
This year.
This year. Well, donate this year. Yeah, I mean, you know, you've got to support like-minded people, but you've got to communicate what it is you need doing as well, and see how it fits in with what like-minded people are doing. And politicians, if you're lucky and you're in a marginal seat, so the Catters will probably get one, and Warrego I think will stay with the National Party, so you don't have any sort of change of government type effects there, but if you did, then maybe One Nation might be able to do something for you, or the others might push back, but yeah, you better come and talk to me afterwards.
Well, one thing I would recommend real quickly is I assume that there's a cattlemen's association or something like that that you belong to. Trade associations in the U.S., as we call them, are relatively important. So many of them get co-opted. I remember when I first came to Washington, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was a great organization. It was one of the big advocates for what was called supply-side economics, lowering the top 70% tax rate that existed when Reagan took office. We had it down to 28% by the time he left. Today, what's the Chamber of Commerce doing? It's advocating for the Export-Import Bank, a subsidy. They're mooching off the government. Everybody, maybe you have no ability because of your electorate, I guess they're called here. You might not have any ability to influence the political system, but presumably you can be part of a trade organization, a trade association, where you could push them in the direction of defending free markets rather than cronyism, because that's a huge problem in the U.S. I assume it's probably a problem here as well.
Okay, Schneider, really quick.
Dan, I just want to hear you tell us a story about one of your best wins that maybe we can take your experiences from your career and apply over here in Australia.
Let's see, I'm 0 wins, 9,000 losses. So, no, we've had a few wins in the United States, and I do think when we had the discussion about politics being downstream from culture, that's bigger than I can chew, but I can talk about the fact that if you can get the grass tops, not the grassroots, but if you can get the grass tops to believe something, that matters a lot. Free trade has always been under assault in the U.S., but for whatever reason, we've been successful getting the elite in both parties to understand that free trade is good. And so even though the general public is bad on the issue, we got through NAFTA, we got through the WTO, and Trump wants to wreck it all, but he's facing enormous institutional resistance from even inside his own administration, from Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill. So I guess the thing I would say to give some sense of optimism is that you really can educate people, at least some of them, some of the time, and we do, and trade to me has always been the issue that I point to, where we've somehow won elite opinion. And then I guess for the grassroots, where we've won on grassroots, to give you another example of a victory, not something I work on, but the Second Amendment is in better shape today in America than it's ever been. Even with you eat crazy evil people doing things like Las Vegas. Why? Because those people got together, they got activated, and Democrats and some Republicans just got tired of losing elections every time they tried to erode the Second Amendment. So yeah, grassroots can win, and grass tops elite opinion can win. The question is, how do we make sure we get the grassroots or grass tops on the right side? And that's what we need to do a better job on. And that's what I'm glad I'm at Empathy Fest to talk about those things.
All right, we have run out of time, so please thank all of our speakers.